Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast. And we're in the throes of summer. Y'all see it, y'all feel it, and y'all feel that energy. And summer usually aligns with many things. Summer's barbecues, summer's family reunions. But also when we think about family, barbecue, and how we gather, this is where people usually evaluate, you know what, maybe I'm looking for a different space. Maybe I want to get a new home. Real estate plays a big role in when I study American history, like how Americans have defined themselves. This also exposes some of the biggest disparities and a lot of the racism that has existed in this nation for generations. But in this same scope, a city like Detroit and other cities, but especially Detroit, many things are happening behind the scenes in real estate that you may not necessarily know about. I'm getting news from people from New York, California, Texas, even some of the people I know overseas talking about what's happening in Detroit and housing in the market and how it's happening. So I have a very special guest here today to share some of that information as we get her backstory too, the Detroit is Different style. Nusrat Moghul, how are you today?
Hi, Carrie. Welcome. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm doing great. Glad to be here. I am really pleased to be a part of the whole, what I call, and everybody refers to as a renaissance, the reborn renaissance of Detroit. Mm-hmm. It's an exciting time. I've witnessed things in my very short number of years here, about, I'd say 3 or 4 really fully immersed in the Detroit scene. In front of my very eyes, things are changing, and find it incredible that, as you referred to, I have clients. I'm a real estate agent turned broker owner, so I own my own brokerage. I grew up in Woodhaven, Michigan, after I moved here from Pakistan, and when I graduated high school, I moved to England. Lived my whole entire life there.
You're giving way too much game. We got to slow this whole thing up. Detroit is Different style. So first, let's go to, before we even get to Woodhaven, before we get to England, before we even get to real estate, Pakistan to this area, to America. Let's just go there. How did that happen?
I was fortunate enough to have a father with great vision. Mm. I am from really a country part of Pakistan, the north of Pakistan, so I'm Punjabi.
All I know from Punjabi is that Punjabi MC song that
Punjabi MC Munne to Bach Ke Rehna with Jay-Z and Eminem. That's the same language I speak.
So what is that region like?
It's countryside. It's a lot of just down to earth, homey people. It's really the more beautiful scenery would be in Punjab in the northern regions. So India split into 2 different countries because the British went and first they effed that all up. They were there forever. Then when they left, then they're like, here, we think you should be here and you should be there. So all the Muslims left India and were told to migrate to West, which became West Pakistan, and other people migrated east to East Pakistan, which is now modern-day Bangladesh. Since 1971, there was a war between West and East, so Pakistan became what is now Pakistan, and East Pakistan became Bangladesh.
So now, in this world, your father, why America? Why did your father want to come to America? Because there
land of opportunity is, renowned around the world. He came here initially in pursuit of higher education. He was doing a master's degree at Long Island University. He applied to do one, along with, I think, about 6 of his fellow physical therapist friends in Karachi. They went to the University of Karachi, which is in the state of Sindh. They all decided this is what we're going to do, and they came here.
Why America as opposed to South Africa, Great Britain, Canada, Brazil? There are many other nations, especially when we're thinking about just higher education, where you can go with universities.
But they're not as renowned as the United States was at that time. Mm-hmm. Now it's more prolific. But a lot of countries don't have the same sort of standing in the world at that time, especially as the United States did. And it was valued as a center for higher education, especially by somebody in a third world country. Mm. It's not the same as anywhere else. Plus, it's the American dream. It's not just in America. The whole world had the American dreams.
And we've had these discussions on Detroit is Different before, just about the it's the packaging and marketing of it. This idea of the Americana fantasy. The television show Mad Men really talks about how that was created, especially when we think of the shadows of World War II. How, as a lot of the other Western world, white infrastructure was figuring things out, and especially Japan, of where things would go, America had the opportunity to proliferate products, ideas. I mean, right now, the dollar itself is the standard of trade for many nations outside of America. So these ideas of the American exceptionalism, the American family, the land of opportunity, milk and honey. Here's a classic one, the stories of people that would travel the world in the 80s. It'd be like, they'd be ready to trade you gold for blue jeans just because of the whole concept of it. And that's where, like, I guess,
And I grew up in that era, and everything you're saying, I would have fully espoused and walked loud and proud being American until you're not in America and you see the reaction you get from other people.
and that's where, like, I was gonna say, so in that transition, and then just even English, as we know, American English versus English is so different. Just as
So different.
the challenge of there and there and there, so like just learning, like, this is the same word, but it means
10 different
there's
But,
there
it's this
and there.
concept of this, the way America promoted itself and marketed itself works, but only for so long, because now we're seeing the consequences of the reality. It's like a little bit the smoke and mirrors that America presents itself to be. I grew up thinking that. I mean, I'm very Pakistani. I'm Muslim. I cook all our own food. I wear our own clothing. We go to the masjid community, but then we also went trick-or-treating, have turkey on Thanksgiving, exchange presents at Christmas, because this is what we do. Knew about the Easter Bunny and Valentine's Day. That doesn't happen everywhere. America is an easier place to assimilate and be a part of a different culture that incorporates everything without losing your own identity, is how I felt.
So your father made the transit, moved here first, and then obviously went through school. What was that relationship like? Because we've heard stories about, like, one person will come and then bring the rest of the family.
Yes.
What during that time,
Happened.
your mother,
Yes.
and I guess in, like, this rest of your family, what was that relationship like? What relationship, how did your mom and dad, like, keep that connection during that time?
With each other or with others?
With each other, with the family, and I mean, raising kids, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's an opportunity. So it must have been harder for my sister, who was 11, and my brother, that was 9, to be thrust into school. I remember my first day.
Well, no, I'm just talking about while the family didn't come. While
It
your
wasn't
father
that
was
long. Yeah.
Okay,
so
so
we
how long
came
was it?
in 75. We joined my dad, and then
When did he come?
he came in 73.
So 2
74?
years. So it was
Yeah.
the 2 years, but that
Yeah.
2 years can possibly be, especially I'm thinking in a young marriage
With 4 little
kids,
kids.
That can be a long 2 years.
It's an expectation that it's for the betterment of, Pakistani women learn from a young age to hold it down. The house rests upon how a mother raises her children. We owe everything we are today to our mother. We know that. And if it wasn't for her supporting her husband's family and her husband's everything, then he wouldn't have been able to have achieved anything. So for sure, he valued and appreciated everything she did. And then when she came here, imagine, she's the only wife. He was the only one that was married and had kids. So when she finally did come about a year and a half later and brought all the kids, then she was the one who's cooking, cleaning, and helping out with all the other bachelor friends of my dad's.
So and in this scope, just even in that 2 years, and you're saying holding down in the culture, because that's really what we're talking about. We're
Yes.
talking about culture.
Yes.
Some of that obviously influenced by religion. Some of it even influenced by family. Were there other people? Like, was it like a standard? Was it an understanding, or was your mom kind of like okay? Like if I'm on the street, kind of the same way like a soldier goes to war. And I've seen that as I have friends that have, served duty and are married, and what that is like. Is it just like an understanding in a village,
It's changed so much. That was when it was the whole joint family situation. My father's the eldest of 7, and so he's the only one that left. He chose to go abroad. He left his young wife and kids there with his entire family.
So the
They all
family
live together.
even
And
assumed, and these are some of the cultural differences that, as I'm getting at, I know people are watching in America, because America, in this whole world of exceptionalism, it also has the idea of the rugged individualism. So for a family to accept, like, it
it
would be
created the
seen,
nuclear family unit,
yeah,
which now we've
yeah,
seen during the pandemic. People are going back to multi-generational living because like, oh, wow, this makes sense. And we, as people from other ethnicities, are bemused by people's newfound understanding of how useful it is. And
yeah.
this support that I've seen, I've heard, and I've been told of by other members of the Black community in Detroit that, we don't help each other. I just saw a post from a friend the other day about when we're 18, we're told, okay, off you go, live your life. We wouldn't do that. We have grown children still living at home, grown adults. We don't send them off anywhere. It's a whole different concept.
And that's where, like, because this is where we kind of get into the cultural differences, and that's why I'm it didn't seem as different to say, like, okay, my sister's about to go work on these projects, so now her husband, my nephew, come live with me for 2 years. Like, that is something in
normal.
America people would look at like, okay, what's going on? Who is
It's
he?
normal.
You got to get
Everybody
your
does
own.
it. No. Even when after I got married and I lived in England, we hosted multiple young people coming from the States. I did that growing up. I saw my parents do that. My dad called over 70 people. 70. They bought 5 houses. My mother and father put the down payments on every house, furnished them for my father's siblings to give them a leg up, help them find jobs. 5 different families, and he brought them all over and helped them, and they all came in drips and drabs. But my mom and dad, they're the ones who did it all, and they're not unique in that era.
Yeah, and that's what
All his
I didn't
friends,
think.
they've all done that with their multiple siblings across the board.
Now with this, because this is the American individualism of it, is like, well, this person, we're gonna have this, because I'm assuming everything still, you're gonna still have disagreements. I assume everybody doesn't agree all the time. It's still gonna be like a grander understanding, the same way that we as Americans, dislike coworkers but still can coexist with coworkers. So I'm thinking that some of the situation may be like that at times.
So here's this: what we grew up with, just our nuclear family, because that's all that was here, and that's a very American thing to do. But we still appreciated coming across other Pakistanis in the community. My mom would see somebody back in the day when it was J.C. Penney, and she's like, "Oh, look, there's like a brown person," and she'd go say hi. And so when I went to England, and there's like all Pakistanis and Indians, and I'd be smiling at everybody, and they're like giving me
What's
screw
going
face.
on? Yeah, yeah.
Like, what? You're just another one. I'm like, oh, like we used to be excited to see other people like that. And then when everybody came, it was a different atmosphere. I was gone by the time they all came. I was already married and left America, but it was a different concept to have. The first time I came back to America after I had one of my kids, and I saw there were about 40 people at the airport that all came to get me. I'm like, well, dang, what is happening here? But that's what people do in Pakistan. It was a big deal when someone traveled, and everybody was excited to have met me. And that was the first time I'd be seeing a bunch of relatives I hadn't seen in years from Pakistan. And they all came to greet. And everyone at Metro Airport, they're like, who's here? What's happening? And it was just me with my daughter, and they came to greet me. So there's the positives and drawbacks of, like, we grew up without it all, so we were able to appreciate it as we got older. I can't imagine having it all the whole entire time. That would have been different. I think it gave us the space to be who we needed to be. And another thing I wanted to add is, so my dad was the educated one that brought other people over. That doesn't mean that those next other 5 families and their generations onwards necessarily have exceeded. In fact, I don't know anyone else in our family that's got a master's degree. People have postgraduate degrees. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're surgeons. They're amazing people. My nieces, nephews, cousins, everything. But I was reflecting that still to this day, I don't think anyone has bothered to do a master's degree in anything yet.
So now I guess the question comes, just why he was in New York, how Michigan? Because, like,
Oh,
New
I can
York is
answer
like
that
a
one
big
easy.
America,
I'll tell you something really basic. When they finished, they're like, now what? And at the time, and I actually asked my dad this recently, because my kids who've moved here from England and they lived in California, and one day when it was bitterly cold, -20, and my daughter's like, but Mom, why? I go, why what? Because why did my grandfather choose Michigan. Why are we all here? We're here because
Yeah.
of him. He had one friend that went to Miami. He's still there,
Yeah.
happy as could be, thrilled to bits, living in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. But a bunch of them came here because Blue Cross Blue Shield offered the best package for physical therapist compensation at the time.
Okay.
Monitor.
In adjusting to
Financial.
the culture here, what was the transition like first for your parents? What was that like?
I can't imagine for my mother. She used to travel miles to go and find coriander, fresh green coriander, which you all call cilantro. And it was important to her. And when we first came, it was really difficult to find halal meat. It was difficult to find spices. We used to go to Windsor because they had a higher population. We used to travel over there to get spices and oil and rice and things that are our basic essentials, but in like bulk because they had it. Clothing. My mother used to sew our clothes because there wasn't anywhere to buy our clothes, our shalwar kameez, our own clothing. Or once in a while, we'd go to Pakistan like every 4 years or something and get a few outfits. But that was important to her, and so she used to make all our clothes when we were little. Quran. We're Muslim, so there wasn't really a plethora of places to go and learn. It was in a little house, which is now a huge masjid off of exit, I want to say 36, 34, something, Sibley Road in Brownstown. And at the time, it was a little house with siding, and we would go and learn there. And my grandfather came from Pakistan, and he would teach us, spent the whole summer inside learning how to read Arabic because we didn't have anywhere to go. Back home, everybody would gather at the community auntie's house or uncle's house or like somebody that taught it, and everybody knew that's where you go every day to learn. But here it was I'm sure a struggle for my mother. And there's this perception of when you're here, you're not learning the same things, and oh my goodness, your children are going to they'll be ruined because they're in the Western society. It's a lot of these stereotypical things you see we experience because they don't know anything that's other is to be feared, right? And so people struggle with that. And, then a lot of those people all came here and they evolved way quicker than we ever did. It's funny because one of the first times I went back to Pakistan and, a large portion of my life was in England where it's very, very close. So they have much stronger ties. And people in England are so busy preserving the Pakistani way and the way that people are in the village. You go back, and those village people have moved on in leaps and bounds. They're not even held back the way people in other countries are, upholding something that doesn't even exist anymore.
So holding on to those traditions.
It's a mixture.
The culture, and that's where, as they always say, like America's a melting pot, and what happens with it. And some of the traditions definitely give the signature of who we are in that culture, which I think that is rich. But also within that, the understanding of this landscape of America. As you say, there are opportunities here. But that opportunity is very transactional. And depending upon how a person signs up to it, and that's what makes our struggle as Black people here. Shout out to Dr. Claude Anderson, Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, as like so many other people that are here in America have made choices to be here. Whereas our journey is so different because we never had the choice to be here. So buying into that American idealism, like really getting into the transactionalism of America, some of us aren't necessarily signing up for that. And if you're not really signing up for that hustle and bustle, which is understanding, America can be a very tough place.
Yeah.
And in that same way, holding on to a culture can kind of be something that like give you some backing, give you some ground, give you some roots here where you can deal with the landscape of like, it's no telling what may happen. We could, here, tomorrow it's like, hey, we find out, hey, guess what? Taxes, all of your utilities, it's just going to be 400% more just because that's what we going to do. You know what I mean? And it's like, why? Who do we talk to? What's going on? You need to get a lawyer. You got to talk to your politician. You got to get an advocate, like dealing with all of that as opposed to like, why can't we just be fair?
As you're speaking, it's occurring to me that how the way we've staunchly held on to me, Pakistani, being my clothing, my food, my my religion, my culture, all the traditions we have of how we do things from the time a baby's born, how we present a baby to the world, and all the joy we partake of, and all the festivals and things that we have that we retain. And Italians have their food. Polish people have their food. Everybody has something of theirs, and it's all popular. It's in mainstream, right? Pizza and pasta and Chinese food and Mexican food. But the only thing that hasn't taken root is African.
And the black experience here is it's entrenched in all of the culture, but because it's such a big it's such a big crime
Yeah.
that America doesn't want to face, it's like you get it in instances because there are certain things as now more is revealed. Ivan Van Sertima, they were here before Columbus. I mean, as more and more information is being revealed that so many black people were already here. The stories of the American Maroons and just more of this knowledge, but even within it, just the distortedness of race becoming something post the tragedies of the Mayafa and the slave trade. I was watching right now the History Network has a Biggest Unsolved Mysteries where Lawrence Fishburne is hosting it, and they're talking about a lost city of El Dorado that's supposed to be somewhere in South America, or what we call South America now, and it's so unique as they talk about these quote unquote explorers, these conquistador explorers to find this gold. And then they're like, they went with 400 men. Like, even though historians today, like, this is a program that was produced, I want to say, like, this was June 5th, and they're like, these explorers had 400 people with them and they had 3,000 natives. And I'm like, okay, 3,000 natives, that means that they captured 3,000 people that had no choice in the matter of one of the quote-unquote explorers emptied a whole lake. So in this process of emptying a lake in Colombia, not far, like they say, like maybe 40 miles from Bogota to try to find this gold, I want to say that on record, they say 2,000 people died in this process of emptying this lake in this manual labor. But this same idea of being an explorer, which really that is being a thief, being a person that works with a villager, that's being a kidnapper, a human trafficker. Like when we start relabeling some of this stuff that are the highlights of Western history, you start getting the truth of like, 1 second, what's going on. And even when we think of your region historically, as they talk about the Silk Road and wanting to exchange, as the idea of the mercantile industries definitely is anchored in those regions of what we call now India, or what Pakistan, Bangladesh. That was a trade that existed between Africa and Far East Asia for generations. And as the as the Western world and Europeans started getting involved, it was like, okay, 1 second, we gotta conquer this. We want to control this. You know what I'm saying? So it changes the dynamics of where things went, because the ideas of the dyes, the merchants, the silks, the fashions, the garments. This is like a something historically that is cherished in those regions. And Europeans came and.
Do you know what they did? When one of them, and I want to say it was Lord Mountbatten, but it may have been somebody before him who first went to India, and he wrote a letter back to the Queen saying, "This land is so rich. It's got everything. I'm dazzled." This long letter. Like, they don't need anything from us. They are way better than us. They have more than we can ever imagine. So what do? Take from them.
Yeah.
It's time to divide and conquer.
And this in these relationships, the Moors, and then also just Islam, being
the Moors were
impact,
Muslim, right?
Yeah, the impact of
800 years, and they're just gonna wash it away like it never happened.
But
they don't know that Gibraltar. My dad taught me the correct way to say it is Jabal al-Tar, the sword of the stone. That's Gibraltar.
I was just gonna say that the Moors had those relationships with a lot of people across the diaspora, further going as far east as China, because of
but then how are the Moors portrayed? Shakespeare and Othello.
I mean, yeah, well, me.
you know, and not in any ever good way. Like and it's carried on to modern day
Yeah.
views of black men in America.
Oh, talk
Right?
about it. So now, when we get into your experience here, what was it like for you being in Michigan? How did you like your Michigan experience as a kid,
Yeah.
high school through? What was that
Loved
like
it.
for you?
I had an amazing, amazing childhood. I really did. My brother-in-law laughs. He's like, "You guys grew up in bubble wrap or something." I don't know anybody that had such a great. Honestly, we had a lovely childhood. We did. Grew up in Woodhaven. Went to elementary and middle school there. Then my again forward-thinking father put us all into Catholic school as practicing devout Muslims. We went there. My brother kind of messed up a little bit at Woodhaven High School, so because he went, then me and my little sister had to go as well, and it was great. I loved it. Graduated. Went to Japan for 3 months.
What part of Japan, and what was that like then?
I won a scholarship from Mazda because they were opening that Ford plant at exit 32, and Mazda was making the Ford Probe at the time. And because all our little downriver Americans had no idea about anything Japanese, it was a very concentrated, intentional thing. Open up Japanese restaurants and experience culture to get to know and help them assimilate into American society. So 10 people were chosen from the U.S., and I got to go and I stayed with the host family in Hiroshima. It was
And
amazing.
okay, and
Another first eye-opening experience outside America, where you could see that not everyone's wild about America.
well, obviously Hiroshima, especially when we think of
Well, we don't know this being taught
yeah,
anything
you're right.
but.
You
just
are
don't
correct.
know.
You
When
are
I went
correct.
to England and I was so confused about, wait a minute, I thought we liked the IRA. I thought they were like freedom fighters. I thought they were good people. Then I get to England and they hate them. And I'm like, oh, wait, what's going on? Like, I saw the BBC News for the first time, and it's not what we're fed here. That was my first kind of introduction to it. And when I was in Japan, we're sitting in McDonald's. You know, there's McDonald's in Japan. We're having, it was like whatever, 10 a.m. We went for breakfast, and they stopped serving. They're serving fish. And we were a little bit homesick. And there was like 4 or 5 of us. We gathered from our individual host families. And, you know, I'm 17, sitting there just homesick. And we're like, man, this dumb country, who serves fish at 10 o'clock in the morning? Hate this place, da da da. And this boy sat next to me. He's like, it's not all that bad, you know? We're like, oh shit, he speaks English. He's like, you don't have to sit there and speak poorly of a country that you're visiting. And I was like, oh, it's the first time I felt embarrassed to be American.
And from there, and you're dipping your toe traveling a lot. After that, what's happening?
Oh, I came back, I got married 5 days later, moved to England.
Wow. Wow.
17. My
Mary,
choice, that's always the first question from anybody to a person of ethnicity. Was it arranged? No, it was not. I was really, really itching to be with him. I was
Okay.
going to go do a law degree, so I didn't want to postpone the beginning of my education. So I got married right away, moved there, did a law degree, graduated, did a postgraduate degree, became a barrister. That's a whole other ballpark. The living situations, the ethnicities, the whole culture. So that's a huge chunk of my life that has seriously impacted who I am for sure. But then made me realize when I came back here, because I lived in London, England. So that's like one of the most cosmopolitan places in the world. But coming back here, I moved to Bloomfield Hills because that's where my family were. So everybody's left downriver. No one's there of my siblings, my parents, and moved to Bloomfield Hills, and I thought this is really boring.
what England, and just quickly, what because you were in England at a time. I'm guessing like the '90s. What was the pulse like in England in the '90s? How did you?
Towards America,
Nah, just period. What was your feel? What did you get? How did you
it
feel?
was a whirlwind of things because I was also. It's like what you say. First of all, it's like a foreign language almost. I was sitting there during my first days of contract law, and nobody's friendly. And I was like, just looking to see what somebody's writing in their notes, and they're covering them. I'm like, you're only writing down what the guy's saying, and I don't know what he's saying. So I'm looking to see, did I not understand a word? And he's like, contractual obligation. I'm like, what is this guy saying? It was difficult. I had a huge culture shock. It took me some time to adjust, and I don't think I ever did. And I was, I became super popular just for being American, and because nobody expected a brown girl to have an American accent, a Pakistani brown girl wearing traditional clothing because that's what they all wore. So I just kind of had to conform. Is more conformist to me, and then did a lot of different things. Never really settled. Never felt like it was my home. I lived there 27 years.
And how did being a mom there, like, what was that like versus?
Difficult. I really wish my children had my American amazing childhood. I did what I could to introduce them to things. So I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. My daughter's the eldest, but I was the only one that people knew that put my daughter into karate, basketball, cricket, football, American soccer, English football. I wanted her to do everything because I grew up doing everything. I used to be a Girl Scout. I encouraged all of my kids to do everything I did. And I brought them back here as much as possible so that they could understand. There's no sense of school sports there the way it is here. It's such a vital part of American childhood, high school, college, sport doesn't exist there. They have rowing. Cambridge and Oxford row against each other. It's like really nothing. They don't have sororities and fraternities the way it is here. People really identify so strongly. It struck me when I moved back how people are so caught up with college days, but that's when relationships develop and remain. And before that, high school. I've seen so many people from high school that are exactly where they were when we graduated. I graduated in '88. There are people who still live in the same town, haven't left. And I'm like, there's a whole big world out there. And, it'd be good to get out once in a while.
So now back to America. What brings you back?
Like I said, was homesick for much of the time. I'd said to my husband at the time that, it's our turn now. In fact, my youngest said he wanted to pursue physical therapy. I was like, right, let's go now. I'd been wanting to move back for a while. My older 3 were out of education. The youngest was still at the time, he became 15. I said, so we don't have to pay out of state tuition. Let's get you in there and graduate. So he went to junior and senior year in Bloomfield Hills High School, graduated from there, and then ultimately decided to not pursue physical therapy. But that's what was the catalyst for me to be like, all right, now we're doing this, we're coming back.
Upon coming back, because you come back to a whole new America, I'm guessing.
It's different.
A lot of things.
It is and it isn't, because I'd been coming back anyway.
Okay, so you were traveling, so you were in the pulse
I used to come
of
every
where
year.
things were.
Yeah,
okay.
I used to come often.
As you said you were homesick, so I can see what it
Yeah.
is. But then visiting versus living is
A whole different thing. So I never
Yes.
lived here as an adult. So I was like, what is this nonsense? It's very bureaucratic. I didn't appreciate that at first.
and then your foray into real estate. What was the gateway into that?
My entire family probably thought when I came back I would continue with law and do the Michigan bar. But my experiences in England practicing law made me realize one thing about myself. I did not want every 6 minutes of my life to be allocated for. Having 4 children, living with in-laws my entire life, I kind of sometimes felt like I was under a microscope, and like the spotlight's always on where is she, what is she doing, what's going on. Because my life was very regulated, I was always accounted for. And then at work, I didn't want that. I didn't want to be micromanaged. I've only ever freelanced, even as a lawyer. My now ex-husband and I had several businesses we ran, and that's just and with Pakistanis anyway, I think we have more of an entrepreneurial spirit as well as the educational part of things. So my sister suggested, what you should do, and I was like, what's that? And she goes, you should look into real estate. I was like, oh, okay, what's that about? She goes, you have to get a license. I was like, what, to sell houses? Because you don't in England. And so I was like, all right, cool. I did that Monday to Friday, did the 40-hour course. The following, as soon as I could, Monday, Tuesday, took the exam. And the rest is history. I was like, wow, this is what I was meant to do. I feel like my whole entire experiences, places I've lived, people I've met, the way I've experienced things has led me to being in real estate.
So the wave, what is it about real estate that like drew you in that you do appreciate? Because I'm guessing
First, it was flexibility. Secondly, I realized real estate, and it's funny because people think it's about houses. It's absolutely not about houses. It's about lives. It's about relationships. It's about people. If you don't like people, please don't get your real estate license. Please don't. And for all those people who were sitting around during the pandemic who thought, oh, I can do this, and because they've been sitting there watching lifestyle, though it's not Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous now.
I mean, it's
$1 million
it's
listing.
so many. Yeah, yeah, it's a lot.
Selling
Yeah.
sunset. We're not selling sunset. We're selling snow. Everybody, let's just be real here. It's a delusion, and people who are not cut out for it are in it. I think you do need to be cut out for it for sure. I enjoy helping people. The reason that I came more so to Detroit is, and somebody put it to me. He's a really good videographer, and we were trying to do this little clip for me, and he put it that way. He goes to me, "You sold so and so a house." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "He's an ex-convict." I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." He's like, "That's a big thing. You helped him find a house, and an amazing house." I was like, "I don't even look at him like that, but that's a fact." And I realized that, tied in with my sense of fairness and justice, which is why I became a lawyer in the first place, is the ability to effect some sort of justice through helping people gain home ownership or regain home ownership, or to elevate themselves, or to be a part of the process of building generational wealth. I, I don't, I'm not in a position to give money in charity as perhaps I was previously, but I give of my time and information and knowledge. And it's, realtors have different views about Zillow, but I feel like all Zillow does is make us look better because they have so much misinformation out there. But whenever I do get a call from a random stranger that I take, and I purchase leads in zip codes of deprived areas, generally speaking, I don't have a problem with that. And yes, I can sell anything because we're all equally licensed in the state of Michigan to sell a $50,000 house or a $5 million house. It's the same license. Commercial realtors have the same real estate license. But to help somebody who wouldn't otherwise have a voice or be heard or be informed or educated, and they're like, they don't know what they're doing. And they're like, wow, I never knew that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And no one's ever told me that before. I had no idea. I'm like, absolutely. And then to see that person go from not knowing anything to turning the key into their front door, it's such a sense of satisfaction. I get a lot from it. And I don't know if everybody isn't aware, because realtors only get paid when the deal closes.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because that's how it is. And that's why people also need to know that they're secure how they are before they embark upon any career in real estate. But twice in my life, I've had somebody offer to pay me to help them.
Yeah.
And of those 2 times, one guy was homeless. He's a homeless guy living in his car, and I was helping him find a house. And we stopped at a gas station, and he went and got me a drink. And I'm like, why? He's like, because we've been out for hours now, and I noticed you haven't had lunch. And here, have a Gatorade. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like, that was so odd to me, so sweet. And the second time was a guy who had back surgery, and he was looking for a lease, and he said, nobody wants to help me. And I said, it's okay, like, I got you. And the third or fourth house we looked at, he started crying. I said, what's wrong? And he's like, you're being so nice. I'm like, this is my job. This is what I do. He's like, thank you so much. And, Kevin, if you're listening, this is about you. And then we're still in touch. And eventually, he met somebody, they bought a house. And he was like an older guy, like 58 maybe at the time. And he'd had back surgery. He was out of work. And he's in a bad way. And he's like, you're so kind. That makes me feel good. That keeps me in real estate.
So you've been riding this real estate wave, if I'm timing things out around the time. Were you here during that first recession, which I still think is a depression? Were you here like around that 2008 area?
No,
Not
I
into it?
came here in 2015.
Okay, so
I
after
missed
that.
all of that. And
So with it, you are here in a lot of the new laws, a lot of the new
Yes, which,
ways.
thank
and
God,
even
they
with
exist.
those new laws, now people are figuring out other weird loopholes in what's happened post-pandemic. And during the pandemic, things have changed to the point where lending is tighter. Like some of these laws have made it
Yes.
even harder on like a lot of stuff. Communities like mine, it's like it's like tougher for poor people to not just find a home. Now it's to the point where some places even to rent. They're asking for some of the same things they would ask for to buy a house.
Sure.
How do you find yourself assisting people knowing that certain things that just exist. Like, people always want to push you towards what is that?
High interest rate loan. High interest rate
High
loan.
interest rates loans. They want to make sure that the home can pass. I'm forgetting. Man, my mind just went blank.
Certificate of occupancy for the
No,
city.
no, 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 no. It's one particular type of loan that a lot of the inspections are passing. Like, so it's tough to sell
FHA.
it. Yeah, like FHA. Like selling the home can sometimes be strenuous, and buying the home can be strenuous. So like even making that match, it takes a different type of focus. And just even in the process of assisting family, because they know that my understanding of business, I help my family often. But real estate and assisting has been the world where, I mean, I've I've sat and I've looked at realtors just like blatantly lie to my family about certain things about like, hey, you can buy this house and then you can refinance 6 months later. And it's like, okay, that doesn't make any sense because technically refinancing is rebuying this house. You know what I'm saying? Like things like that. Like it's a lot of lies. I'm not even gonna say it's misinformation, and I assume it's just because that same hustle and bustle that most real estate agents have to be like you have to be on the go because if you're not killing, you're not eating. If you're not eating, you know you gonna be
That's
looking
why
for a
you
house.
ought not be in it unless you're already somewhat secure or know that you can go without. I do this by choice. And don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely going into the field of where I can be representing new developments. And of course, I want to sell $1 million houses all the day long. Why would I not? And I'm very capable of doing that. So I do have the whole Bloomfield, Birmingham, Troy crowd that I do sell to. That's my community for sure. That's where I come from. But that doesn't mean I am not going to take time to speak to somebody who wants $1,000 lease, or if I have a client that wants me to lease something out. I've done that. I have people I can pass the work on to who need to know how to do these things. But my answer to you saying about these disreputable, first of all, I didn't realize when I moved back as well that lawyers, that slippery slope of like used car salesman, lawyer, realtors right there. I had no idea. I'm like, wow. I went from to one
Lawyer,
disreputable,
yeah, I know.
disreputable profession to another. But you know what? It's a matter of how I carry myself. So integrity, I think, always wins. And the people who are not behaving in that manner won't last long. I've met this man who wants to buy 45 homes in Detroit. I kid you not. He's already bought 45 before I met him. And he's like, we met in about March. We started talking February, March. And we're in mid June. And we haven't been able to get one under contract, partly because of his specifications. But the other huge part of it is realtors not responding. And another reason I opened my brokerage in the city. And everybody who knew me, like, well, why? Why aren't you in Troy or Birmingham or Bloomfield?
So
That's where
first
you
off,
are.
for all of us, break down what a brokerage is,
Oh, sorry.
and then the role you play in this market.
So a brokerage is a real estate brokerage. I belonged to, so people will be familiar with Keller Williams, Chapter 21, and they have branches of offices. I was with a company called Arterra Realty. First, I was with Sotheby's. I left there 2 years, and when you go from bad to worse, you start at the bottom, you can only go up. I had this delusion it was going to be affiliated with Sotheby's in England. It was not, just a mistake. But it was in Birmingham, and I was living that Birmingham lifestyle, but no Birmingham income. That's for sure, because of the owner of that company at the time. Then I moved to Arterra in Rochester. That guy's phenomenal. His name is Vito Terracciano, and he was is the part owner of Artiva Homes. They build luxury homes, but more importantly than anything else, he's also in this because he wants to be. He doesn't need to be. He's not financially driven purely to be in real estate. Of course, he wants to be profitable, but he created it because he saw a gap in the market of educated, knowledgeable realtors.
Okay.
So then he encouraged me to become a broker. I got my broker's license. I guess it takes forever. People struggle with it. I got it passed, whatever. It's like
So the role of a
strenuous.
broker?
So-
What do you do as a broker?
So first of all, you can only qualify to take the exam if you've been a realtor for 3 years and you've done at least 18 transactions and you have to undertake a 90-hour course. The real estate course is 40 hours. So then realtors, if you want to become a broker, it's a 90-hour course. And it sounds simple enough, but then by that time you're a practicing realtor as well, hopefully. And so it takes some time to get through it, and it can be online. During the pandemic, I was like, here, let me just do this thing. I flirted with the idea of it, had it sitting there in my inbox. I'm like, all right, let me do this. Sat the course, applied for the exam, passed the exam. Then you can open your brokerage by yourself, but I did it through the guise of Artera. So Vito helped me do this thing called Broker Solutions, where I'm still affiliated with Artera. I still pay Artera to be a part empowered by Artera Realty. So I have access to everything they have, but I'm the broker. I'm in charge of my agents. So at the moment, there are 5 of us. I had 9.
So a broker, what's the
A
role of a
realtor.
broker?
So a broker, I'm the managing broker, so that means everything that a realtor is doing has to go through my affiliation.
So when
Every
you
real
say that,
estate
what do you mean?
agent must hang their license with a broker.
So the broker is the person that basically you're like approving if this is a good
Yes.
deal, if this makes sense. Will this will the lending be present? Is
A
like
broker
what
is
are you doing?
It's like the managing partner of any sort of, say, law firm. Like, what is that person doing? The buck stops with me. So anything that my realtors are doing, they sign a form saying I'm practicing under Nusrat Moghul. Like, she is the broker of this company. So when I was with Artera, we had another broker at the time. So that means if I mess up, he's responsible.
So when you say you're responsible, does that mean that
So I'll get a call saying, hey, your agent did this, or I'm happy about that, or I'm not happy about that.
so the broker is signing off for money to be released? The broker is signing off for the state to
Money to be
like
collected. That
what's
means,
the, like what role does the broker play?
active day-to-day role with anything is just to be available for support to any of my agents, but that there isn't a more of an active role like that for me personally at this stage of my brokerage because it's small.
But a large brokerage. So I'm
large
not
brokerage-
necessarily saying for you. I'm
It's
just
the
saying
same
for,
thing,
like,
I would say. They man it. It depends on what kind of role they have. There are many brokers that are not active realtors. I'm an active realtor. I sell actively, so I think that's really important to keep your.
So
finger
you
on
can be the
pulse.
realtor and the broker. So basically,
Yes.
you could sign off like the whole idea of like we get the deal go through. I don't have to wait that day, or I got to call my people. You are the people you call. So if the contract looks right, then I'm guessing things move forward, because I thought the realtor is the person that basically can represent the property for the exchange to happen.
Absolutely,
The
a realtor
broker-
has the ability and does do it. So when I was a realtor, I could still do the same things I can do now. I have more financially. I have more control. That means I'm not every realtor that you see, generally speaking, has to split their commission that they make. Generally speaking, in Michigan, you sell a house for $100,000. The buyer agent gets 3% of $100,000, which is $3,000. The person selling the house, that listing agent, gets 3% of $100,000, which is $3,000. That $3,000 is then split between them and their brokerage. So generally speaking, and when I was at my first firm, it ended up being 50-50, 60-40 to the broker, which is crazy. You have companies out there that offer all these insane splits, and realtors don't know any better, these newbies, and they take them because they're feeding them leads and things. So of that 3,000, the realtor may or may not end up with 1,500 after all their hard work
Yeah.
of selling you $100,000 house.
Because then it's like other fees. It's like, okay, just the American way. It's like, now it's like, well, we got the lead fee. Then we got we listed
but
across this fee, that fee,
you
to
don't
this
need
fee,
to
that fee,
even
you
do
know.
any of that.
I mean, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm just telling you, like, right now, it's,
Yes.
I was reading the New York Times just did an article about, like, when you buy a ticket right now, a ticket will say, like, hey, $50 ticket. Okay, I want to go to the show. But then by the end of the transaction, you're looking at $80 because they're looking at they're calling them ghost fees.
Yeah.
But that's the American way. It's always been an American way.
It is, and there are some things, but generally speaking, we're able to identify and allocate all our fees to somewhere or other. Realtors play a really important part. I think personally, I've seen we hold it all together. We're like the therapist, the person who gets you through this, the marriage counselor, the parent-child counselor, the person assisting seniors in making the transition out of their home, guiding the adult children who have to put their people into a home, or with bereavement when we deal with probate.
Yeah.
Someone just died and they have to sell their house, and so you have to deal with 5 siblings who've inherited the house, and who wants to hold on to the house and who wants to let go. I had to help somebody, as I'm with the buyer and he's with the seller, and he's like, we're taking it off the market. He refuses to sell. I was like, I've just given you a full price offer. He goes, I know, I was like, let me talk to him. And
Yeah.
I talked to somebody else's client, and he listened to me.
Now, I have this question too. In Detroit, the market is it's interesting here.
It's
There,
difficult to pull a comp because it's in the middle of
that's where, but
so
I think two
much.
things. It's difficult to pull a comp because I personally also think that the appraisers, many of the appraisals and appraisers are nowhere near Detroit. They don't live anywhere from Detroit, so they're appraising properties based on things that a person in Detroit would know differently. That's one thing. The second thing is a lot of just like getting a clean mortgage because I mean get just that alone. I mean not clean mortgage, getting a clean title can be difficult here because
Yes.
so many houses are land contract based. Getting lending here because now a lot of days, like from what I'm seeing in the little limited knowledge I'm learning more about real estate is lending usually likes to lend at a certain threshold. And a lot of the housing stock in Detroit is under that threshold. So that means that to buy houses in Detroit, you really got to come hard cash. And coming with hard cash, even if it's quote unquote under this threshold, it's limiting access for a lot of people that do have, hard working, regular paying jobs, but would not be lent money, especially after a lot of the changes in the laws after the 2008 crisis.
So let me just back up. You said quite a bit there. So the first thing you said about appraisers, generally speaking, we use appraisers within the vicinity. So we don't have Bloomfield appraisers in Detroit. Generally.
Well, let me say this
That's-
too. For let's give some 101 knowledge too. Okay, the appraiser is the person that appraises the value of the property
For
for
a bank.
it
A
to
bank
be.
hires
Okay.
a person called an appraiser.
Yeah.
They go through a strenuous process because I looked into becoming one. I was advised to become one.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, I was like, oh, hell no. Absolutely not. It's not for me. It's a lot of statistics and numbers and fact finding and figures. The actual time they spend in a home is minimal. They'll be in, some people are in and out.
Probably
Some people
5 minutes.
I've seen people spend 20 minutes, walk around thoroughly, look at it all, but the scope of their physical observation is limited. It's more of what the statistics and numbers are that they can pull. So they're not comparing your house to something in Birmingham or Troy. They're comparing your house like for like as much as possible. And that also is difficult based on street by street in Detroit sometimes.
Yes.
And you have an appraiser is sent out by a bank, and now those are blind. They have a pool of appraisers. They can submit a request and depending on who the lender is. And selling a home in Berkeley, let me tell you, sold a home in Berkeley. It was listed $275. We had a full price offer. They used at the time Rocket. I don't have a problem sharing this with people because I like using Rocket Mortgage. Actually, I like UWM. I like anybody who gets the deal done. So Rocket sent their appraiser out.
Wait, and let me say, okay, all of this is based on, as she said, Rocket or UWM, huge mortgage housing. A mortgage house, for people to know, that is a loan to purchase the property. So basically, obviously, someone has to if you were going to lend, I don't know, a friend $400,000, you want to be like, all right, man, are you gonna really be able to pay me back this $400,000 over 30 years or 28 years? And so it's a lot of things that go into that. But then on the flip side of it, it's like, is this 400,000 really worth 400,000? You know what I'm saying? Because we have to do the time value equivalence of what this money will be like. And this is really nerd stuff, but I just want to make it plain for my Detroiters different people.
Sure.
So.
Also, UWM is a wholesaler, so I shouldn't have said that, but they underwrite other people's loans. Anyway, the guy that came to appraise the house, he appraised it at 242. This is in the middle of a hot market. We're like, huh? And the buyers are like, hey, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, we can't. Now, what are we going to do? Are you going to come down in price? We're like, no. Like, well, we can't come up. All right. The deal is dead. Because the appraiser that came out said, I appraised this house 4 years ago. And it's the same house. And this is what they've done to it. And this is what they've not done to it. And it's gone up from 220, what they bought it at, because I wasn't here when they bought it. And they bought it at the top of the market. This is something else. You always make sure that whoever you use as your realtor, make sure that they're giving you the best value for money. Is this home really worth that? How much are we going to go over, or how are we going to stay where we need to stay? So that area of Berkeley was just a hot spot for that type of young couple moving in with no kids and first time home, whatever. So They paid too much, really, essentially, at the time they bought it. It didn't appraise for much more in 4 years than a $25,000 increase, which is unusual. So that deal died. Somebody else came along, used a different lender. They still put it in at 275. Their offer, it appraised at 276. 2 weeks later, another lender. So appraisals fluctuate not just in Detroit; they fluctuate elsewhere as well. And we as realtors get offered opportunities. And I was just telling someone this last week that I really need to be intentional about learning more about appraisals. You can order another one, but it's the buyer. You can contest it as well, but the buyer ultimately is paying for it. And it's about $600.
Yeah, and I had
That's expensive.
in helping my family. I bought a couple of different appraisals on a couple of different properties, just based on what we were thinking, what the seller wanted. Like it, I'm still learning this because I still have a bunch of other.
And we can do
things,
comps, and you pull comparable prices in the area that sold within a certain time frame, within a certain quarter mile, half mile, that are like to like. You like an educated realtor that's informed will definitely help you get an idea of what your house should be selling for, where you shouldn't have to pay $300, $400, $500, $600 for an appraisal. And I had one once, and sometimes, that appraiser was interested in it for himself, I believe, gave me a really low appraisal. And I was like, I disagree. I went and I listed it for more and I sold it for more, but he was trying to lowball me, even though I paid for his services, but he wanted it for himself and he was wrong.
And this is another one of those gaps
Relationship
in
things where you need to make sure you have somebody who operates. This word is key: integrity in everything you do.
But I think, especially when we think of Detroit, especially being such a black community, and the history of the black community in America, integrity is something that can't be relied upon usually. So as I've seen the
But you have to-
appraisals, and I just want to throw this, like, as I've seen the appraisals and different things happen, like my community, people that watch this show, they know that we're dealing with a development that's actually in Highland Park, but it's still in the footprint of what was like plotted lands and things like that. And now they're exercising and changing things where this is going from residential to mixed use industrial. I'm like, things like this are going to have impacts on what could happen in our property. This is going to have impacts on different things. So as you pay attention to what's being built around you, what's happening in and around the house, this has impacts on property values. Property values have impacts on a lot of things in our community. Like when people look at my neighborhood, the first thing people think is like, wow, man, maybe the crack era was crazy over here. The biggest thing that impacted my community was actually around that time of that Great Recession. Because before that Great Recession, Rocket Mortgages especially, was approaching a lot of people that own their homes saying, hey, do you want to refinance? Do you want to refinance? A lot of these refinance loans in my community led to, I would say,
people losing their homes.
Huge amount of people losing their homes, because it would be like, grandma stayed in the house. That was grandma's house.
Yeah.
Grandma loves her family.
Yeah.
Grandma gets this, $50,000 check. The first thing grandma gonna do, she gonna take $25,000, she gonna spread it with the family. And then after taking that $25,000, spread it with the family, she's gonna say, all right, let me take 10 and keep it just for good savings, add this to the mix. And now I got 15,000 to have a cushion, and I'm gonna do some repairs. I'm gonna get some new windows. I'm gonna work on these steps that I wanted to. I'm getting kind of old. Let me add another railing. Right? That was cool when it happened in 2005. Then couple years later, grandma passes away. We're looking at what the balloon of now what was this subprime. So like at first that payment was easy to pay. That easy to payment, balloon payment, oh my God. Now a home that has been in our family for years, we're paying a higher mortgage on than if we were to just, go on and buy a mansion out in the suburbs somewhere. That happened across my neighborhood rampantly. And it led to so many people leaving my neighborhood. And the term that we say over here is hawking the house. That's what they say. Like,
so it's funny when I drive around with investors from foreign countries. I've had Argentinians, English, French. Then we have Californians, Texans, New Yorkers. And when they drive around, and I also felt like this when I first moved back, where is everyone?
Yeah.
And I have an answer. One of the answers.
One of them. And I mean, it's other layers, but that was one of the biggest things. My babysitter, now that that house is demolished, which is a whole
That's
nother
another whole
discussion.
thing.
But
Like, why is there so much land?
my
I'm like,
my
these were all
uh
houses before.
my babysitter was one of those people, you know, hell of a it made some hello cookies too. I miss McAfee's cookies because of things like that. But this was something that prominently happened, and I do believe that not just more Rocket, but many people. And I'm not necessarily blaming the corporation. I'm more so blaming, as you say, the integrity of the market and where things go. But a lot of homeowners in the late 90s, early 2000s were targeted for a lot of that refinancing.
So this is then when you mentioned now laws have changed, RESPA is in place,
Yeah.
and realtors and lenders must be licensed. They're very arduous. My son, my daughter-in-law, my other son, many other people, along with thousands of, everybody knows somebody that works at Rocket. And the exams they have to take now to keep up with their licenses, they can't just willy-nilly turn up and be a lender. There's a lot more to it. And you have to be licensed and you have to maintain your licenses. You have to have continuing education. It's not just as easy as it was before when there's a lot more regulations, which you said, perhaps rightly so, that it makes it more difficult for people to borrow. But the difficulty lies in the fact that you want to ensure that the people borrowing are able to afford it.
But the challenge, really, even the linchpin of the challenge in that, it may be leading to more of my cynical nature towards a lot of stuff in America and the integrity of America, where banks were bailed out during that time. The people were not.
Yeah,
America supported the business,
Yeah.
but they didn't support the people.
right.
And communities like mine that have homes that are either owned by the land stock or owned by banks, it's like I would rather have a family in there because a family will pour back in as opposed to making sure that lending institutions were state supported. And this has been like a discussion I think that always exists, as you say, like, when you get to America, there are opportunities here, but you do have to understand what's happening in and around you through this theater of America, I believe. And this theater of America is very transactional. And it usually the transaction leads to the people with more wealth always wanting to take advantage of people with less.
However, now during this pandemic, we saw a circumstance where the people were helped, right? The SARA Acts that were providing CERA. It's escaping my mind. COVID Emergency Relief Act.
Yeah.
And the rampant fraud that occurred there because it was so easy to do so. And people who claimed the money, took the money, and never paid their landlords. There's two sides to every story.
I
and I
think-
get what
yeah,
you're saying,
yeah.
right? But now, that time where people had mortgage forgiveness and people had the ability to stay where they were, and then renters weren't allowed to be evicted, but nobody was paying anybody's rent. There's a whole big mishmash of things where the government did step in and help the poor person or the little people, more so in providing some mortgage relief assistance as well, where you didn't have to pay for a little while if you couldn't afford it because you were out of work.
There were definitely moratoriums on that. And even my argument there would be, man, oh man, and I'm always going to advocate for the people. My argument there would be you need to support the landlord too. So, like, it's not just like, hey, don't
But
kick
it's been
people out.
everywhere.
But it's like, don't just kick people out. You got to support the landlord too. Because also during the pandemic, we looked at the wealthiest people, the as they say, what is it? The wealth gap in America exponentially exceeded to the point of what people would label, quote unquote, like a third world country. Right now, the wealth gap in America, the disproportionate nature of it is grotesque. Every billionaire probably tripled, quadrupled their money during this time of the pandemic. Not every, but most. So like these same disparities, I feel like as things happen in action, when dominoes fall, you definitely make sure that you honor the small business, and you honor the people. It's ways to do that. Our government has ways to do that. I mean, right now, I want to say we've funded to the account of, I don't know, maybe about $300 billion into a conflict in a country that most people couldn't even point out on a map. You know what I'm saying? So the money exists, whereas I never will point at a person with less because that person is looking for opportunity, or the business person that's looking for that. There are opportunities in both, but that wealth gap as it As it expands, there are other things that businesses can exploit and take advantages of. And these social discussions are debates that have happened in America for years, and I think will continue to happen for years. But at the root of it, just understand the nature of what America is and the opportunities that do exist here. And if you are a person, just know that America's design, what I usually say, America is designed for America is designed for white men that own property and own businesses. The further you get away from that, the further the design of America is for you. So you have to
So that
find
just
that
means-
opportunity
Yep.
within that and
Yep.
understand that there are some advantages that we have as people not in that class, but there are many disadvantages. Use those to your advantage.
So what I'm taking from you, the ultimate thing is if that's what you realize about America, is designed for white men because of their ability to have property
Well, property
run-
and
businesses.
businesses.
So that's what then every other person needs to be doing. So why are the brown people successful or yellow people or many other ethnicities who've come from elsewhere with nothing and made something of themselves? With nothing, I mean they had education perhaps, but even the ones who did come with little, like my I can't even say they came with little. Say my relatives that came, but they were all given a house and said, "Here you go." So, say other people are not always that fortunate, but you hear of all these success stories of people who've come from elsewhere and been nothing. So, I guess what I'm getting to is to capitalize upon that information, we need to really focus on ownership of property and this whole.
And even that in the black story, and it's like I hate to be the and person, but our relationship here, because race is such a race and racism, especially towards black people, is such a part of it actually is the biggest American institution in my thought process. It's different, meaning like, okay, America has bombed itself, meaning the American government has bombed itself 2 times in American history. Both times are in black communities looking to sustain themselves. You have the movement, everything that was happening in Philadelphia, and you have, and I read a really good piece on Oklahoma City bombing and Black Wall Street. As black families have looked to take advantage of and walk that path, we've dealt with different disparities. I don't know if most people know that the history of lynching black men and black families kind of come from the history of a lot of the co-ops that were started after enslavement of black people. So like black people have dealt with in that whole idea of like, okay, let's embark on this rugged individualism. We've dealt with atrocities of the Ku Klux Klan. We've dealt with the government bombing a city in America. We've dealt with, even what was happening in Philadelphia.
But then you're dealing with it, right? And you want to move forward from it, and you want to not. I don't want to.
Well, I would say this. I would say we need to be cognizant of what this of what we're dealing with here. So by dealing with it and being cognizant, it's not just as simple as like, okay, we can just tap in the way that someone else can.
But do you think people who come here who can't even speak the language or don't understand the mores and social ways and ethos of the people that they're surrounded with still don't? I mean, I read an amazing quote by Maya Angelou. Nothing will work unless you do. One, and two, I just want to just refocus everything and be more positive and to reinforce what can be done. Remain cognizant of what has happened so that history's in the back. It's a rear view mirror, so it's there. We have to learn from it, but to look forward is, for example, I have a new client moving back to Michigan from Maryland. He called me about a house on Ferrand. He's like, there's a house on Ferrand I grew up near. There's 350,000. I'm like, yeah, it's beautiful. He's like, I'm really interested in that. I'm coming back. And I said, what do you do, sir? And he said, you know what I do? He goes, I'm in the middle of developing an app for black people to only use black-owned financial institutions. That's positive thinking. That's taking something where he's lived outside for like 20-ish years, he's coming back, and to be able to reinforce the growth so you can rebuild something. But now it's not just Black Wall Street in one city, right? And he's starting in Michigan, South Carolina, and Georgia, I think he said to me. And he's picking the states where he already knows people where he can make contacts and develop it. But he wants to go to every black-owned institution in Michigan a bank, a lender, so that everybody can help each other and not just always go to the other ones that are readily available. That's like a small way.
I mean, everything you're saying, it's like it's and two. That's all I would say, and we just have to be mindful of it. And I definitely don't necessarily think that it's a easier or not easier, but we just always must be cognizant of our past here, just due to our journey here is a lot different than many other people's stories. So with it, we can't just engage with the story. And I would say that really for every American, because the story is packaged. I mean, my degree is in marketing. The story is a package. It was presented to you in a package. It was presented to you to just drink in. But just know, as you're drinking that in, it's also a lot more to understand about the background of getting there. So, like, I guess on a positive note, I would say there are a lot of opportunities here. But with it, we also need to be aware of the true history of this nation to understand that we ain't that true history of this nation ain't that long ago. A lot of those people are still alive and poured into their descendants, pour into their businesses, pour into their property, pour into their ideas, some of these traditions that are not necessarily in our best interest to provide us opportunity. So let's not blindly walk this path as if we're entitled to it. We have to force it upon this nation.
It's not something that can ever be ignored. One of my friends yesterday actually is from DC, and he was telling me about, I don't know her exact name, Katanya, the black female Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
And her husband, that's white. Mm-hmm. And she's a direct descendant of slaves, and he's a direct descendant of slave owners.
Yeah.
And they have children together now.
Yeah.
And look who she is.
Yeah.
Right? And so it can evolve, it can, and it does, clearly. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that anyone's forgotten anything or doesn't know anything. Mm-hmm. But then what do you do moving forward?
Many things, but right. You got to always know that past. So with that, classic Detroit is different questions. Your very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
A 1988 Corvette.
Okay. All right. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
Probably school.
Okay. All right. That was like direct. It was like, okay, sorry. I'm driving to school. All right. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. You get to play a song. What do you play?
I'm so lame. Something by Drake, I'm sure.
Okay. You got to give me a song. Give me a name.
Oh, man. I don't even know. I can't think.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Something from Drake.
Sorry. Let me amend my choice there. I just recently met Montel Jordan.
Okay.
And I didn't even know who he was. I first heard his song when I was
You saw this tall dude, and it was like, oh, this guy's tall.
Way back in England, I heard this song, and I didn't know who it was, and they just said it was Montel Jordan, whatever. I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to like 25 years later, and I had the privilege of meeting him. I'm like, you're him.
Okay.
And this is a well-known song around the world.
Okay.
Yes, that would be a good song to play.
This is how we do it. Would be a party song. You'd be partying it up.
Yes.
And last thing, and this actually happens, but now I'm going to take it even further. An alien comes to Detroit, and you get to take them to one place. Where do you take them?
The Riverwalk.
Okay. And why would you take them there?
I like it there. It's peaceful. It gives you so much perspective on, look, we're here. We're one country, but we're separated by just this water. And there's a whole big world out there.
Yeah, and he'd be like, yo, we got beaches everywhere up in Mars. I'm just messing with you.
Riverwalk. It's a nice place to be in Detroit right now.
Definitely. And I love the attitude and your commitment to being in this field, connecting people to their dreams. As they say, home ownership is something that I do think a gateway that can provide a lot of opportunities for people.
And hey, I'm not just saying it. I sold my house in Bluefield Hills, and I've just moved to Detroit.
That's what's up.
This weekend, actually.
That's what's up.
So,
Hey,
happy to be here.
She with boxes everywhere. How do people get in contact with you?
My phone number is 248-931-4212. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. My company is called Moghul and Main. Moghul because that's my name, and Main Street because I want to help everybody be mainstream homeowners.
That's what's up. All right, there we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.